engage in black rituals using skulls, candles, and ceremonial group masturbation. It's supposed to be kind of a gay group marriage thing. Brothers under the skin is how the Bonesmen describe their relationship. Their graduates are a powerful bunch of devils. Averill Harriman and Prescott Bush were Bonesmen. George Herbert Walker Bush was a Bonesman, and so was his uncle, George Herbert Walker. Robert Lovett, architect of the CIA, was a Bonesman, selected for membership by Prescott himself. F. Truby Davison was also selected for membership in Skull and Bones in 1918, the year Prescott did the picking. Davison was in charge of hiring for the CIA in 1948, the year George Herbert Walker Bush left Yale in search of a job. Davison had a son, Endicott Peabody Davison. Endicott was Skull and Bones, class of 48, making him brother under the skin with George Herbert Walker Bush. He's also the Bush family lawyer. As both former president and director of CIA, old Beelzebub himself, George Herbert Walker Bush is the most distinguished of modern Bonesmen. But the question is whether he was in the CIA in 1963, as Hoover says. In a world where personal connection is everything, no one could possibly have a closer relationship to the head of hiring for CIA than George Herbert Walker Bush. Bush's first job on leaving Skull and Bones was to work for Neil Mallon, brother under the skin to Prescott, class of 18. In a letter to White House aide C.D. Jackson, dated March 26, 1953, the now Senator Prescott Bush described Neil Mallon as a very old and dear friend. I might say that Neil Mallon is well known to Allen Dulles and has tried to be helpful to him in the CIA, especially in the procurement of individuals to serve in that important agency. So George went directly from Skull and Bones. He went directly from being a brother under the skin to the son of the director of hiring for CIA to working for a recruiter for the CIA. You could not ask for more powerful evidence that Bush was in the CIA when Hoover said he was. But you can get it. This letter records a meeting between Prescott Bush, George's CIA-promoting father, Neil Mallon, the CIA recruiter, and Allen Dulles, the head of CIA, to discuss, quote, our pilot project in the Caribbean, unquote. In 1959, the year that Allen Dulles began planning the CIA invasion of Cuba at the Bay of Pigs, Bush began his independent business career as the sole owner of Zapata Offshore Oil. Zapata Offshore's oil rigs just happened to be positioned right in the middle of CIA operations in the area 30 miles north of Cuba near Cay Sal, an island used by the CIA for supplying the various terrorist raids of Operation 40, Operation Mongoose, Alpha 66, and the rest of these murders against Cuba. The assassins of Operation 40 were supervised by E. Howard Hunt. Hunt was also a supervisor of the Bay of Pigs invasion. The secret code name for the Bay of Pigs invasion was Operation Zapata. Operation Zapata? Zapata Offshore? Now you could fairly ask what kind of an idiot would give a secret operation a secret code name and name it after his own company that was operating in the area. What kind of idiot? George Bush, that's what kind of idiot. In World War II, Bush named his plane after his wife, the Barbara II. When this plane was shot down, what do you suppose he named his next plane? Did you guess it? The Barbara III. While the CIA was preparing for the Bay of Pigs invasion, the CIA ordered a large ship from the Navy to carry tanks and guns and men to the Bay of Pigs invasion. But no one was supposed to know this was a U.S. Navy ship. The world was supposed to believe that these were just private citizens of Cuba, so it was necessary to disguise the ship and to change the name. The name was changed to the Barbara. Now, this is not a big deal. It's a small deal. But it's there. Bush has a habit of naming things in his military career after things in his personal life. He named 2 planes after his wife, and one of the 3 CIA ships at the Bay of Pigs was renamed the Barbara. It's a small piece that just happens to fit perfectly with the bigger picture of Bush as a CIA officer working with anti-Castro Cuban terrorists. This same habit of naming things in his military career after things in his personal life also connects Bush's oil company, Zapata Offshore, to Operation Zapata and to the anti-Castro Cuban terrorists. But again, let's not overemphasize this name stuff. Finding the name of Bush's wife on a Bay of Pigs supply ship, or finding the code name of the Bay of Pigs invasion on his oil company, is a small but clear detail of this much bigger picture. The big picture shows us that at the same time that Hunt moved from working inside Harriman's office to go to the CIA where he supervised at the Bay of Pigs invasion, at the same time that Richard Bissell moved from working inside Harriman's office to go to work for the CIA where he became the director of planning for the Bay of Pigs operation, at the very same time the oldest son of Harriman's closest associate went to work in the exact same outdoor office where Hunt and Bissell were now operating. Hoover's memo names Bush as a CIA supervisor of the Bay of Pigs invaders, the anti-Castro Cubans. There can be no reasonable doubt about this connection. George Bush was working for the CIA, assisting in their operations at the Bay of Pigs, working for Bissell, working with Hunt, working with Sturgis, supervising the CIA's misguided anti-Castro Cubans. His supervision of Hunt and the others at the Bay of Pigs is a key piece of evidence linking him to the assassination, but it is not Bush's only connection to Hunt and the other suspects. After Bush got beaten up, losing 2 elections for Senate, Nixon brought his sorry butt into the White House, trailing E. Howard Hunt behind him. Haldeman says no one could figure out who brought Hunt into the White House, but it isn't that hard to figure out, because not only did Hunt and Bush come to work for Nixon at exactly the same time, but no one in the White House had any connections to CIA operations. No one had any connections, while Bush, on the other hand, was directly involved in the same CIA operations in the same area at the same time that Hunt was. And there's more to this story. Nixon's chief of staff says that everyone was astonished and flabbergasted in 1970, the day that Nixon announced that he was bringing John Connally into the White House as his Secretary of Commerce. No one understood the connection between these two, one the leader of the Republican Party and the other the leading Texas Democrat. Haldeman says, however, that Connally insisted that before they could hire him, they first had to get a White House job for Bush. Why? What is their relationship? What does Bush have to say about it in his autobiography? Not a word. Not one. If he and Connally ever spoke in their entire lives, Bush doesn't mention it. How can you possibly explain the connection between these people? Do these guys have anything in common? The answer is either no, they all came together in 1970 for no apparent reason, or the answer is this one: they all met on the same road to power. And there's more to the Nixon-Bush-Hunt connection than that they came together at the same time in the same place. Remember, when Hunt was sitting in jail demanding that Nixon pay him $1 million in hush money or he'd start talking? Hunt got paid. The money came from this man, Bill Leitke, George Bush's oldest, closest, and most important business partner. Leitke helped Bush found Zapata Offshore. And then, in 1959, when the CIA needed the company, Leitke handed the company to Bush, made Bush the sole owner, so Bush could carry out secret operations without any outside observers getting in the way. The fact that Bush's closest business partner paid Hunt the $1 million is just one more connection between Hunt and Bush. But wait, there's more. Remember this man? Leitke's money actually went to him, Ramon Rodriguez. He was a CIA-trained money launderer working in a Mexican bank, and he wrote the actual checks that Hunt received.
I made payments for the Watergate burglars, yes.
18 years later, in 1990, he was working for the main Colombian drug cartel when Vice President Bush sent this man to ask him for $10 million to help pay for the illegal terrorist war Bush was waging against the people of Nicaragua.
Well, the only government mention that he made was Vice President Bush. The request for the contribution made a lot more sense because Felix was reporting to George Bush. Here you have a CIA guy reporting to the old boss.
Now, how did Bush know this guy? How did he know he had $10 million, and how did he know that he would pay it? It's a good question. Whatever the reason, the connection is still there. Bush is connected to him by this incident, and through him, Bush again is connected to Hunt. Two more connections between Bush and Hunt. It's starting to get ridiculous. Hunt's mother is not so thoroughly connected to Hunt. And now let's look at Bush's role in the cover-up. In 1975, the Senate Select Committee on Assassinations began to investigate the CIA's role in the Kennedy assassination. The committee uncovered the CIA internal memo that Spotlight magazine wrote about, which says that Hunt was in Dallas on the day of the assassination. William Colby was director of the CIA at the time.
Oh yeah, Hunt was there all right. He and Bush were in charge of the shooters.
And he was cooperating with the committee.
But they weren't really in charge. They were just taking orders.
And supplied the committee with the Hunt memo.
From civilians, like Allen Dulles and the Rockefellers. Maybe I
Colby
should shut
was
up
suddenly
now.
fired, and, out of the blue, supposedly with no CIA experience, George Bush Sr. was appointed to take over as head of CIA. Why? What qualified Bush for this job? One thing. Bush could be relied upon better than Colby to cover up the facts of JFK's murder because Bush knew that the trail led straight to him. He had to cover it up, and he did. He ended CIA cooperation with the committee and effectively shut down the investigation. The fact that Bush played this leading role in the cover-up connects him to every person threatened by this investigation. So, there's a ton of evidence that connects George Bush to John Kennedy's killers. But now we'll look at a couple of pieces of strange evidence that, while they don't connect Bush to the killers, do connect him to the assassination in ways that can only be described as weird. This is George de Mohrenschildt. He was a wealthy, Russian-born Texas oil man who liked to party with minimum-wage clerks. He helped get Oswald a job at the Dallas School Book Depository. Of course, he was CIA. The night before he was to be questioned by the Senate Committee on Assassinations, his head was blown off with a shotgun. In his pocket at the time was an address book, and in his address book was the entry, Bush, George H.W., Poppy, his family nickname, 1412 West Ohio, also Zapata Petroleum, Midland. By itself, this proves nothing. Taken in context, however, it is one more amazingly direct link between Bush and the assassination. But that's not all. FBI documents record that, on the day of the assassination, at 1:45 p.m., Mr. George H.W. Bush telephonically furnished the following: that he recalled hearing in recent weeks, the day and source unknown, that one James Parrott had been talking of killing the president when he comes to Houston. Now what the hell do you make of that? Just crazy. When questioned about the FBI documents, Bush says he does not recall making the phone call. His failure to recall such dramatic events puts him into a unique club. Like Nixon and Hunt, he can't seem to remember the events of November 22, 1963. It seems that this guy was everywhere, connected to every single aspect of the assassination, planning, execution, and cover-up. No one, not Hunt, not Connally, not Nixon, no one on the face of the earth could possibly have better credentials as a suspect than George Herbert Walker Bush. The scale in this case is tipped past a certain critical point. The probability that he was involved is genuinely beyond a reasonable doubt. The Hoover memo is not circumstantial evidence, it is direct eyewitness smoking gun evidence from the most influential figure in the history of American law enforcement. The rest of the evidence merely provides a context for this memo that makes it impossible to reasonably believe that the former president was not involved in the murder of John Kennedy. If we could present this evidence to an unbiased jury in Texas, they would certainly give him the death penalty. Ow! Ooh! Ooch! Oh! Ow! Ooh! Ow! Oh! Take it easy, fellas! Ow! ooh, ooch, oh, ow, ooh, ow, oh. Take it easy, fellas. Ow, ooh, ow. When I was just a little fool, my mama sent me off to a place called school. I liked the part about taking a nap. It seemed everything else was a load of crap. No fooling. Taught us George Washington chopped down a cherry tree so we could all have freedom, justice, and liberty. Did I mention Columbus discovered America? Well, I went off to college, and believe it or not, the harder I studied, the dumber I got. Taught us we was all geniuses, folks back home was asses, and elites like us ought to rule the masses. Some schooling. Had to drop out, though. Just couldn't seem to get my shoulders inside my asshole. Well, I got slapped in the face. No, it couldn't have been ruder by a friend with a film by a guy named Zapruder showed Kennedy's brains getting blowed out the back. Seems the Warren Commission was hooked on crack. And the FBI, and all the TV and radio, and every newspaper on God's green earth. Well, the day JFK got blown away, old George Bush was in the CIA, and though E. Howard Hunt might have held the gun, George Bush Sr. was surely the one that said do it. Told him again during Watergate, do it. Sold that slogan to Nike. 40 years later, I'm preaching away. Seems my head's still out in the light of day, but people are still crying, Kennedys are still dying, and the TV and the papers and the teachers still lying. Seems it's still pretty dark out in the middle of the day, even if you don't have your head shoved up 3 miles up your asshole. There are many things we will never know about the assassination. The guilty parties have done all they can to make it this way. Investigations have been blocked. Much evidence has been destroyed. Witnesses have been murdered. We are left with bits and pieces. So what do? If we do what scientists do, we take the bits and pieces and try to guess what they mean, argue with each other, and try to figure it out. If we do what the prosecutors do, we develop a theory about what happened based on the evidence and challenge the accused to come up with an alternative explanation that isn't ridiculous. There are certain things about the Hoover memo that demand answers. Why did George Bush lie and say he was not the George Bush referred to in the memo? Why would the CIA ask the FBI to report to them about CIA operations? And why would George Bush leave Dallas the day of the assassination and travel all the way to Washington, D.C. to receive this stupid, lying report? We're going to take up these questions and others, and we should, because this is one of the most important pieces of evidence in the entire case and really deserves careful examination. To understand what was in Hoover's mind when he wrote the memo, we need some historical background to understand the complex relationships between the FBI, the CIA, and Lee Harvey Oswald. While Oswald was in the Marines, he was stationed at a top-secret air base for U-2 spy planes, where he learned Russian. This is not the standard training for a Marine grunt. He was obviously being groomed for some sort of special intelligence work. He got a hardship discharge from the military to take care of his mother, who wasn't ill, and he immediately bought a plane ticket with money he didn't have and flew to Russia. As soon as he got to Russia, he renounced his U.S. citizenship and declared his intention to turn over all the military secrets he had learned while he was in the Marines. He later married, and after a few years returned to the U.S., where all his friends were men with CIA connections and who all died shortly after the assassination and before they could testify about their relationship with him. So Oswald very likely at some point worked for the CIA. But, according to declassified secret documents of the Warren Commission, they were told by the Dallas District Attorney and the Attorney General of the state of Texas that Lee Harvey Oswald was working for the FBI at the time of the assassination, that his informant number was S-179, and that he was receiving $200 a month. In his wallet at the time of his arrest, he had the name, phone number, and license number of Dallas FBI agent James Hosty. Witnesses have testified about secret meetings and package exchanges between Oswald and other FBI agents outside this garage. In 1960, 3 years before the assassination, J. Edgar Hoover found time to write a memo regarding the lowly, insignificant lone nut Lee Harvey Oswald. What the hell did Hoover find so interesting about this guy 3 years before the assassination? Hoover's memo complained that someone was using Oswald's identity while Oswald was in Russia to buy trucks for CIA-trained anti-Castro Cubans. Given this pile of evidence, we have to admit that it was at least possible that Oswald was involved with the FBI. What could Oswald possibly have been doing for the FBI? Well, what was the FBI doing? Hoover was helping JFK crack down on the CIA. Less than 3 months after becoming president, Kennedy awoke one morning to discover that the CIA had launched a major invasion of Cuba at the Bay of Pigs, using their secretly trained army of misguided anti-Castro Cubans. Allen Dulles, the CIA chief, figured that if he launched an invasion with the CIA's private army, Kennedy would be forced to order an all-out invasion of Cuba to back them up. Kennedy refused to go along, and the entire CIA army was killed or captured. Recently declassified documents show that Kennedy had never approved the CIA plan for a massive invasion at the Bay of Pigs. And while Kennedy publicly took the blame for the CIA disaster,
there's an old saying that victory has 100 fathers and defeat is an orphan. Because I'm the responsible officer of the government,
he quietly fired the top 3 men at CIA: Allen Dulles, Richard Bissell, and General Charles Cabell. He still had an army of CIA-trained Cuban terrorists to contend with. He lied to them.
I can assure you that this flag will be returned to this brigade in a free Havana.
And he allowed them to keep training for raids against Cuba at several CIA-sponsored training camps under various names: Operation 40, Operation Mongoose, Alpha 66, and several others. But the Cuban Missile Crisis changed everything, and most of all, it changed John Kennedy. In October of 1962, the world was brought to the brink of nuclear war when Kennedy was told that the Russians were building nuclear missiles in Cuba 90 miles off American shores. Kennedy announced that the U.S. would stop all Russian ships headed towards Cuba. The Russians announced that they would not be stopped in international waters by U.S. ships. Both sides prepared for war. At the very moment that the world teetered on the brink of nuclear disaster, against Kennedy's specific orders, the CIA sent a U-2 spy plane flying into Russian airspace, which could easily have been mistaken for a bomber getting ready for a first strike. Right in the middle of this critical period, as both sides prepared for full-scale nuclear war against Kennedy's specific orders, the CIA instigated attacks upon Cuba by their anti-Castro Cuban paramilitaries. These insane attempts by the CIA to provoke a nuclear holocaust changed Kennedy fundamentally. He caught a glimpse into the souls of his adversaries, and he spoke of them as having a collective death wish for the world. The missile crisis ended when the Russians agreed to dismantle their missiles in Cuba. However, Khrushchev, the Russian leader, insisted that these CIA training bases be dismantled, and that the Russians be allowed to verify this with inspections. Kennedy ordered these secret training bases closed, but many of the groups were openly defiant, refused to close the bases, and talked about murdering Kennedy. Kennedy ordered Hoover to locate these training bases and shut them down. Hoover was forced by Kennedy to go head-to-head with the CIA. Although no arrests were made, Hoover located the camps and shut them down. The question remains, how did Hoover locate these camps? Their location was secret even to the President of the United States. It's a very relevant question. We have seen a substantial amount of evidence that Oswald was an FBI agent. He was seen at the training camp in Lake Pontchartrain, Louisiana, by the secretary of the former FBI agent who ran the camps. This camp was raided and shut down days after Oswald visited there. Raiding and shutting down these camps was a highest priority operation of the FBI. These circumstances suggest that Oswald was, in fact, Hoover's most important agent in the field, so that on November 22nd, Hoover not only learned that the CIA had murdered the President of the United States, but that they had framed his top agent, Lee Harvey Oswald, as the lone assassin for the murder. This news sent a very direct and very personal message to Hoover from the CIA. Mess with us and you die. This is the message that J. Edgar Hoover received from the CIA the day of the assassination, and this memo is a record Hoover made of his response to that message. The memo says that Hoover was asked to investigate the, quote, misguided anti-Castro Cubans, unquote, to see if they were planning any raids. But the CIA had been helping these misguided anti-Castro groups to conduct unauthorized raids against Cuba on a regular basis for years, until, on Kennedy's orders, Hoover's men began to raid the camps and shut them down. These camps were sponsored by the same agency that Kennedy had been fighting since his first day in office, the CIA. And now, with Kennedy dead at the hands of these misguided anti-Castro members of Operation 40, Hoover is asked to give a report on Kennedy's killers to their CIA sponsors. Now you have to make some effort to appreciate this situation. Oswald had infiltrated the CIA's Operation 40. Marita Loren says that Oswald was in the room with Hunt as he was passing out the money. Oswald was reporting to Hoover, so Hoover knew that the misguided anti-Castro Cubans were working with Hunt and helped to kill the president. On the other hand, when Hoover shut down the CIA secret terrorist training camps, the CIA figured out that Oswald was a rat, so they knew that Hoover knew. And yet, according to the memo, the CIA asks Hoover to tell them what he knows about the misguided anti-Castro Cubans. Why? You, sitting there, come on, think about it. Why does the CIA ask Hoover to tell them what he knows about their dirty laundry? When it's their dirty laundry, they got it dirty. Are they expecting to learn something about their own operations? I don't think so. Is it to find out how much Hoover knows? Because they already know that he knows everything about their dirty laundry. Then why do they ask him? Why? Remember that Bush called the FBI the day of the assassination? He told them that he was in the Dallas area, and then he got in a plane and flew to Washington? If he really wanted information on the anti-Castro Cubans, why didn't he go to Miami and talk to the FBI agents who were actually involved in investigating the Cubans? If he wanted to hear it from headquarters, why didn't he just call? And he already knew the answer to the question, so why did he go to all this trouble? There's something going on here. What? These are important questions. If you want to try to understand the world you live in, you can't just shrug them off.